Hi, everybody. This is Tara Bradley with the Growth State, and I'm super excited to have James Barrood with us today. James is an advisor to Tech Council Ventures and Jumpstart Angels, where they help startups grow their businesses, which is exactly what we're all doing. He also has a podcast, which I definitely recommend that you follow. It's great. It's how I discovered James, and it's called A Few Things. So we're going to just jump right into it. James is, we've got his bio and info page. We're going to link all of the cool things that he's done. He writes a lot, he puts out a lot of content, he helps others put out content. And so definitely follow him on all of his social and that podcast, because like I said, it's a great one. And how I got to know James. So James, thank you so much for being here today.
It's good to be here, Tara. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I start all of my interviews with the same question, and I'm particularly excited to hear from you because you do help so many people, right? You volunteer, you do the tech council thing, you're really into ecosystems, which I'm hoping we can talk about. And I usually find that those people that help the most had a pain point at some point where they're like, "Wow, that was painful. I really learned from that, and I want to help others, not make that mistake, or if they do, soften the blow a little bit." So I'm wondering if you can think of one or two of those pivotal moments that were painful for you that kind of put you down this path of really investing in others.
Yeah, well, two things would probably be important to know. One, when I graduated from college, we were in sort of in the middle of a recession, and I started a business that went sort of sideways. I mean, it wasn't a failure. I learned a lot, but if I had gotten advice, it would have made me more successful. So that was sort of an advertising business with other colleges. That was interesting. And then I went into my family business, which is a real estate business, was started in 1940, and that was also an interesting experience. I mean, it was working with family. Number one is a whole dynamic, and then not liking the industry was another one. And
Mhm.
so I left that and went back to school. And then when I came out, the opportunity to work at an entrepreneurship center was sort of a great thing for me because it enabled me to sort of conquer those two sort of experiences, right? Not being super successful in my first startup, and then dealing with a family business, which is super complex, right?
Mhm.
And so this entrepreneurship center, one of the few in the nation at the time, was had programs that helped family businesses and help startups and helped growth companies. So didn't expect to stay there more than 2 or 3 years, actually, because I had offers to work in corporate,
Mhm.
and after 17 years, it was so compelling. It was just a great experience. That's why I stayed for so long.
Awesome. I love that. And so for those of you that are watching that are thinking about, having your family come in, make sure it's something they want to do. Otherwise, they're going to end up leaving to go do their own thing anyways. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, you come with a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really excited to get your expertise on here. And the one particular piece of content that I watched that I got excited about is you were talking about a funding, how do you tell the funding story? And really in a meaningful way that kind of gets people knowing what you're about and what you're going to do with the funds, and painting a full picture. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, and the things that you see people do really well and the things that they always miss. You're like, no, you've got to have that in your funding story.
Sure. Well, first of all, there are so many resources out there, right? So to get sample pitch decks, to understand what investors want, what they're looking for, and to find the right investors, right, that are in your segment, is an important process to take, right? So typically, when people are starting off, it's friends, family, and fools, as we call them, right?
Right.
So you still have to pitch them, right? They're going to invest in you maybe because they're related to you, and because they love you, and so the bar isn't so high at that point, right? And maybe the money level is not so high at that point. But once you go for external investment, angels, and then VCs, you clearly have to know your stuff and be very focused, right? Because they're investing in you and your team, right? So that's really important to really to highlight your experience and your drive and your persistence. It's really important, but then to have a really focused pitch and plan, right? And the investors want to know that there's a big exit at the end and that you're aware of that, or a big market that's really, but that you're going to take this piece of that market, right? And so if you can be focused and tell that story in a thoughtful, short way, then you should have a better chance of at least continuing that conversation and getting funding.
Gotcha. And I love that you bring up focus, because I know another area that you spend a lot of time really focusing on and putting out content is around innovation. And this group is notorious for being innovators. They're innovating all of the time. And I think sometimes that can take away from focus, right? And it can blur priorities. How do you talk people through that to say, hey, yes, it's great that you're innovating and we want to do that, but you're all over the place, and I need to pull you in, and we've got to get some focus in this messaging.
Sure. And it depends what position that person is in, whether it's a small company, a large company, nonprofit, right? So, and it also depends on whether that organization has sort of capacity or has structure to allow you to sort of try something new on the side, or and then maybe fold it into something more formal. There's those questions persist, right? But at the end of the day, if you don't know what you're innovating for, that's a problem,
Mm.
right? So if you are at a CPG, consumer products company, and that company has been doing the same thing for 50 years, and then you want to do something different, you should probably know that it's going to take a lot of compelling sort of value propositions for that owner
Mm.
to do something different and to take a chance.
Yeah.
If you make that risk low and you make a compelling case, they should be open to it. In addition, right now we're going through a very disruptive time. So everyone has to innovate just to survive. So maybe now is your best time to try some of these things because so much is at stake.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea, and it's the thing that I think a lot of people in this space miss, right? They're scaling, they're trying to figure out how to get as much market share as possible. Innovation is great as long as it's focused, right? Like, you still want to have the end in mind. If you're innovating just for the sake of let's try this, let's try that, and you're all over the market and it's really unclear what you're doing, that can be really detrimental. But if you're focused and you're innovating in a really focused way, maybe within a niche or within a particular product group, can be super effective, especially when times are kind of uncertain.
Absolutely. No, that again, it all depends on so many, there's many variables there, right?
Right.
Type of organization, leadership, right? The best innovations come when you have leaders who get it, right? Who are patient and who can sustain that over time. The problem, Tara, is that most companies, small and large, only have so much patience, right? And especially the large ones, right? They're
Yeah.
public companies quarter to quarter. If they don't hit those numbers, they are going to cut back on anything that can be cut back on.
Hmm.
So invariably, it's those innovation areas which aren't showing results the next day, next
Right.
quarter, or even the next year. Sometimes those folks are working on things that are, a few years away.
Hmm.
And if those leaders don't have the patience, the fiscal, capability to wait, then those areas are going to be cut
Hmm.
first.
Right. And I think it's a great point. And for the leaders watching this, since you're also probably leading some of the innovation, I think it's really important to lay out that planning horizon, right? Say, hey, this is something that we're doing now and we're testing. We don't intend to see returns until maybe the end of next year. Really letting people know that we're not taking this to market and it becomes our, lead product tomorrow. There is a method to that. And so I think that careful approach to innovation is really key. Talk to us a little bit. You do a ton of work in your region and across the nation on building networks and ecosystems of people that can work together and scale and learn from each other. And I think it's a space that especially founder CEOs and entrepreneurs don't necessarily jump into naturally, right? Something happens and then they're like, oh, I better get some help. And I think it could be really different. I think that if they were to seek out some of those mentors and coaches and just colleagues earlier, it could have a really big impact. And I'm guessing that you see the same thing as well. Tell us a little bit about ecosystems and what you mean when you talk about that. And then, how do people get involved and why is it so important?
Sure. So ecosystems are really just large communities, right? So they involve the business community, academic community, state government, nonprofits, all of those working in concert to have a robust community, which helps startups grow, growth companies scale, and larger companies innovate, right? And so that's what's part of an ecosystem. Now, for entrepreneurs or anyone, frankly, you should all be active networkers, right? Because you never know when you need to find a partner. You never know when you need to find a new job. You never know when you need to find investment, right? For your idea, whether it's, your own idea or even part of a company. So this is this is good advice anytime, but especially during a pandemic, you should have your own personal advisory board, right? So you should and nurture that. Well, you should have several, actually, if you possibly can, circles of people that can give advice from time to time, right? In the past, it would be a dinner every 6 months, right?
Right.
Now it's virtual, obviously, but that presents a great opportunity to build those circles, those advisory groups nationwide or
Right.
globally. Now is the best. Everyone's more generous now during this pandemic. So I urge everyone, whatever you're doing, to take advantage of that, right? Everything is flat, everything's equalized. People are more generous. People can hop on the Zoom call, make it short and sweet, 15, 20 minutes. Everyone should be able to do that, from the best known business leader to the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, around the block, right? So and everyone in between, right? So you need to think carefully of those different types of, just start with one, right? The
Right.
different people you want in your circle or on your board. And I would really think about that. And for 2021, do that regardless of what industry, what job you're in. That's really helpful. In addition, networking has never been, well, networking is hard. Entrepreneurs are busy.
Mhm.
They don't see the benefit right away in it sometimes, right? And they would prefer to work on their company or their product. But networking is even more important now, right? Because to get funding, to get sales, it's usually a referral. Now it's harder, especially when you're online, to do those things. So if you have a larger network, it will be easier to open doors. And so I'm recommending, going forward, that entrepreneurs improve their skill sets to network online,
Mhm.
right? And that means you better be good at leveraging LinkedIn. You better be good at leveraging other social networks. And you should have a very good setup on Zoom,
Right.
right? To present yourself in a great way. And so you can communicate what your needs are, what you're looking for. And then there's, now you can go to conferences around the world essentially for free. And if you're thoughtful enough about it and savvy enough about it, you could meet the right people more effectively than ever.
I think that's a great point, and I have found that I love the dinners. I love the let's go grab a drink, let's grab a coffee, and just getting to know people personally. And I was really naive to this whole online world of networking, and I have found when I made the effort and reached you in particular, reached out and just said, hey, I'm having this issue and I'd love for you to help and come and talk to this audience. Was a quick conversation, and I'm finding people want to help, especially if you're really specific about, hey, I think that you can bring, if you're asking them to speak to somebody, bring this knowledge, but more specifically, hey, I follow you. I'm having this issue. I'd love to pick your brain. So many people are saying yes right now, and I think it if you go into it and really with the servant's heart too, and you're sure to end those with how can I, is there anything I can do with you? People, that community will build really quickly. I'd love your perspective on I kind of feel like it's almost, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. It's almost like a spider web of some interconnected communities, right? Because you might have a group or ecosystem if you're trying to get funding. There might be a group of people or connections you want to make. If you're trying to learn more about marketing or innovation, there might be a different group you want to take. How do you manage all of that without getting completely overloaded and like, all I do is network anymore?
Yeah. Well, it's about time management, right? It's
Mhm.
about, doing a better job of laying out your network on a spreadsheet or on some app or platform. And I honestly, I don't even, I'm probably better than most, but I don't even feel confident in the way I manage it. It's really not as organized as it should be. And I believe if I'm better organized, and that's one of my goals for next year, is to be better organized in how I leverage my network.
Mhm. Yeah, I am exactly the same, and I would say I don't feel like I'm a great networker, right? Like I don't love the big group settings. I like more of the one-on-one stuff, and so I'm completely the same. And time management's always always a challenge when we're looking at it. You mentioned a couple of times that the times that we're in and how it's different, than how we've behaved in the past, how people are connecting and making connection, has, it's, I would say, evolved. Some people are like, this is terrible. I don't, I can't wait for it to go back to the way it was. I'd love your perspective. Do you think it'll go back? Do you think that we will, go back to the way that we built networks before? Or is this really the new way to do it? And it's just going to continue to evolve into something that's really different?
So I believe that everything will be hybrid in the future,
Mhm.
right? Now we're so accustomed to doing things on Zoom, right? So there's a lot less need to do business travel, right? That's going to go down. So conferences, for example, those will be they'll be more special,
Mhm.
right? So for VIPs or for a small group who want to pay this or that or fly in, they'll go in for a really delightful, more delightful experience.
Right.
Then everyone else will have the option of going online and getting that sort of less expensive or free experience. And I think both are fine, right? If you can afford it and go in person, I love being in person, I love meeting people. I love the serendipity that comes with that. And I really miss that. I mean, my whole career has been based on serendipity and just meeting people and bumping into
Right.
people. So I miss that. So I look forward to that. On the other hand, I was just talking to a friend the other night. You could be so much more efficient online if you just reach out to people in a thoughtful way,
Yeah.
and don't have to waste 20, 30 minutes talking to someone who goes off on a tangent. So that risk, you reduce that risk factor and the time factor by a large amount. And so that's what I see in the future.
Mhm.
Again, if people can get really savvy at networking online, the benefits are enormous. And that will just accentuate, strengthening those relationships when you meet those people in person.
Right. And I love that you bring up that thoughtful connection, right? Because we all get 100 LinkedIn messages a day, or we get these random emails. It's like, do they even understand what I'm doing? If you're going to do that, don't network that way. Get to know the person, try to find that common thread of connection, and then reach out in that way and be really specific. I also love that you brought up that hybrid model because I have historically done a lot of work in healthcare IT, and they love their user groups. User group, and I personally don't love them because it feels like just the same thing over and over. We spend a ton of money, and all we're bringing is our current user base, right? Like it's not a sales event. Um, but when we switched to virtual, I felt like the content was much richer, and it was still a great experience. And I love what you brought up about the hybrid approach. And so what I would really urge this audience, if you're not thinking about that, like how do I have this hybrid network even for my own company going forward, you really need to think about that, because I think you can create that C-suite experience if that's who you're dealing with, and create something really special. um, but then if you do something that's virtual and have it be really meaningful, your reach is far, far broader than it ever was with, a user group. We used to get excited when one year we would go from 100 people to 200 people. This year we went completely virtual, obviously with everybody else, and we had 3,500 people, and they were all super actively engaged. Much better bang for our buck, and a fraction of the cost, right? I think it just makes good business sense to do that now. And I would agree with you. I think that we're going to see a really different mix going forward.
Absolutely. It is it is one of the benefits of this pandemic is that everyone is now okay with doing things over Zoom or virtually where they weren't okay with it before.
Right.
And that's going to save so much time, so much energy, so much expense for so many.
Well, and even the remote workforce, right? I mean, I've worked with a lot of companies who are like, no, they have to be in the office, have to, I'm like, why? That's silly. And now, everybody that thought that way are getting proven right, right? Because it's like a lot of businesses are doing really, really well, and they're cutting some of that overhead of having office space. I'd love to know your perspective on, as these companies grow, they're obviously gonna run into roadblocks, into obstacles. And we talked about it earlier, around networking, and the planning horizon can seem very short term. How do they keep that long term focus so that the fires of the day, and there'll be days when there's 100 of them, right? What do you think? How do you think that they keep clarity around what they're moving to, and for their teams? Like, what's the best way to do that?
Right. So I think in this more virtual environment we're in, over communication is going to be so important, right? And if you can't see people in the office as much, then you have to compensate or overcompensate for that by doing more things online and more fun things online, and just keep things sort of vibrant. And then again, over communicate your vision, right, as a leader for the company, and then try to be as transparent as possible with your team, and that will help you build your team as well. The benefits of again, virtual workers is that talent could be sourced pretty much anywhere. And that's not good for communities sometimes, unfortunately, but it is good for leaders if they need to grow their company and can't find that talent locally,
Mm-hmm.
which would be preferred historically.
Right.
So that presents an opportunity for leaders to take advantage of.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that we're just about out of time. If someone is interested in following you, obviously, there's James's podcast, A Few Things, which they can find. What's the best way to find that?
Just Google a few things with Jim Barrood.
Jim Barrood. And we obviously have his bio information and all of the ways that you can connect with him. Jim, I really, really appreciate you coming on today and chatting with us. I think that your insights are super valuable, and I hope that people are putting some thought into how to build that network. I think it's one of the last things we consciously think about as we build and scale a company, but especially in today's day and age where engagement's so critical, I think it's a really important topic.
Well, Tara, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And I would just want to welcome anyone to reach out to me, regardless of the position you're in, if you want guidance or advice, or just want to connect.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you, Tara.